It's hard to imagine a time without the RPG genre being as prevalent as it is today. Some of the greatest games of all time are RPGs, with varying levels of immersion, storytelling, and any other descriptive gaming buzzword. The definition of RPG can be stretched. Some may call Red Dead Redemption 2 an RPG. Others may call it an action-adventure game. What about Resident Evil 4, Ocarina of Time? Are those RPG games? Honestly, it's up to the player, but RPGs have come a long way since the 80s. With the first RPG game, Dungeons & Dragons, it was a text-based RPG playable on a microcomputer. It opened up the door to a world of possibilities, with RPGs becoming a household genre in the world of genres. So, let's look at some games from the 8-bit era to now, and talk about which games did RPGs fairly well. Some of the most popular and more well-known RPGs of the 8-bit era are probably Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, and Earthbound, or Mother. The Final Fantasy titles span across 3 decades, so to say they're successful is an understatement. The very first one, to some, sets the groundwork for how RPGs should work. It basically helped pioneer turn-based combat, including character classes, level systems, inventory management, and above all, the storyline is rich and engaging. Now, I can say the same for Dragon Quest, but not so much the same for Earthbound. Not in a bad way. Earthbound breaks the mold a little, actually. It doesn't take place in medieval times like you see many RPGs up until that point. We're talking modern day, baby. Unconventional is the word I'd use to describe everything about this game, from the writing to the combat. It walks and talks like an RPG, but I don't think it's a duck. Out of these 3, I think Earthbound places way more importance on character development and our connection to other characters in the game, and it's also probably got the funniest writing out of the 3, but at the end of the day, these 3 are absolutely pivotal in the history of RPGs and laid the groundwork for almost every RPG that's came out since. That's all good and dandy, but what about the bad? Well, bad is subjective. Some games are good, but it depends on who you ask. Take Dragon Power, for example. Poor localization and a hard to follow story made the game just too odd for players to really put time into. Or Tombs and Treasure, which suffered from really not explaining what to do or where to go. A lot of these games from this 8-bit era really fell short in these ways, whether they were just trying to be an RPG and fell short or just fell short. What about 8-bit era games that teeter on both RPG and another genre? One that did it well was the original Legend of Zelda, which is considered an action-adventure game with RPG elements. Most RPGs have turn-based combat, where with Zelda, you press a button. There also wasn't any leveling up, you just acquire new weapons or some kind of item to help you throughout the game. And the storyline is more linear, with no real major decisions to be made. It's kind of a one-way street. Games that teeter like this are still RPGs in my opinion. Role-playing game, I'm playing the role of Link in a game, I can do math, but the 8-bit era didn't really stick around forever. That's what brings us to the 16-bit era. Super Mario RPG, in my opinion, one of the definitive RPGs of the 16-bit era. Why? It's in the title. Super Mario RPG was a collaborative effort Nintendo made with Square Enix, the creators of the Final Fantasy series that were well versed in the RPG genre. What they created is a fantastic story with really fun and engaging gameplay, which in my opinion popularized the RPG genre even more because the IP they used, everyone knows and loves. And now, Final Fantasy III did release as well around this time, but I more so wanted to talk about Chrono Trigger. One of the things that can really make or break a game is its formula. So at base, Chrono Trigger is an RPG, but there are a lot more RPGs around. How did Chrono Trigger break the mold? In my opinion, it's the time traveling. Yes, I know Dragon Quest did this too, but it's so cool. You can visit multiple eras in the game, prehistoric times, the Middle Ages, or the future. The way you interact with characters and the decisions you make can alter the course of history, leading to alternate endings or storylines that can cross over. It adds an interesting layer to the story, all the while maintaining the many core elements that RPG games possess. And honestly, it might be the most underrated RPG of this entire era. On the other hand, take a title like Draken. Draken is an okay RPG at best. Yes, a lot of people have fond memories with this game, especially from what I've read, but it might unfortunately be the nostalgia talking. The game's storyline is kind of messy. One thing that also sets a lot of games like Final Fantasy apart from other games from this era is that some games push the limits of the console that they're on. Final Fantasy pushed the Super NES to its limits. Draken, it's a game, all right. Actually, I take all of that back. Have you guys heard the soundtrack for Draken? But as much as I love this era, I think the era might just be my favorite. Breath of Fire 4, Final Fantasy 9, Wild Arms, Dragon Quest 7, Suikoden 2, Chrono Cross. Final Fantasy 9 is a masterclass in storytelling. Chrono Cross is not as good as Chrono Trigger. It still carries its weight though. Suikoden 2, which you could play as over like 100 characters, all with their own ability. All of those games and more from that 32, 64-bit era have been talked about to death. But as we progress into this era, what might be more important to focus on is the more mainstream introduction of JRPGs and WRPGs. In short, JRPGs are Japanese role-playing games and WRPGs are Western role-playing games. JRPGs tend to be more linear, playing into well-established characters, established storylines, and predetermined outcomes. WRPGs are way more open-ended, whether it's character customization or open world. WRPGs tend to give you more freedom and overall are just way less restrictive. Why are both important? Because as we move past these bit eras to the modern age, both of these types of RPGs become more prevalent and the divide between them becomes more apparent. An example of modern day WRPG would be Skyrim. It contains RPG elements, but heavily emphasizes open world experiences and player customization. Persona 5 is a great example of a JRPG. With a predetermined cast of characters, turn-based combat mechanics, it very much holds on to its RPG roots. But however conservative each side plays it with RPG elements, they are still RPGs at the end of the day, which I think is great. There is a fine balance between the two and both can coexist well in the modern gaming landscape. Games like Fire Emblem, Octopath Traveler, Cyberpunk 2077, Starfield, Baldur's Gate, Diablo, Zelda all implement a range of RPG elements, big or small. The 32, 64-bit era to the modern era was and still is ripe with plenty of great examples of RPGs. And I suppose, since I said some bad examples for the other eras, it's only right to do this one for the modern era. Honestly, it's a tie between these three. The first year of release for Fallout 76, or Mass Effect Andromeda, or Anthem.
Y'all are trash. Like, y'all are so trash.
The influence that RPGs have had on gaming is immeasurable, and it's one of my personal favorite genres. If it wasn't for turn-based combat systems, where would games like Pokemon be? What about moral choices or alternate endings like Red Dead Redemption 2 has, or character customization, skill trees, or level up upgrades, open worlds, dialogue, you name it. There are so many things to thank RPGs for, and it's hard to imagine modern gaming without them. And this is all just the cherry on top. There are a ton of RPG games that I barely touched on or didn't talk about at all. But for now, this has been Cryptic Carry. If you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe, and until next time, see ya.